is it?
It's a horse they found wandering about in no man's land.
What kind of an horse?
A miraculous kind of an horse, be my guess.
So it's been a great honour and a great pleasure to introduce the producer and director of War Horse, Mr. Steven Spielberg. And please welcome the producer of War Horse, Kathleen Kennedy. Welcome, guys. Congratulations on the movie.
Thank you.
Stephen, let's start with you. It's very rare that a project is successful as a novel, as a play, and as a movie. What do you kind of think is the bones of this story that makes every iteration possible?
Well, you know, the bones of the story is basically a love story.
Right.
You know, that makes it a little bit universal. You know, it was that way in the book, and certainly was that way on boards on the West End. And that's what we tried to do in our adaptation of War Horse, was to really create a bonding story where this, where Joey basically circumvents the emotional globe of the Great War and gets very not only connected with the people who are caring for Joey, but more importantly, Joey has a way of bringing people together, especially people from both sides of the war.
Right.
I drew more from Richard Curtis's script. I mean, Richard wrote a brilliant screenplay. I mean, there's two screenwriters credited. Lee Hall wrote a wonderful first draft, and Richard came in, and he was my primary writer throughout the entire process of pre-production and right through production of the picture. And I was very drawn to the way Richard saw the story. You know, a little bit more like the book, Richard did not want Albert to come back into the movie until very late, so we have a hiatus from our central character. You know, and we don't even see Albert until the third act. And that was something that Richard brought into the equation.
Yeah, and I do think it's very interesting, though, that the central idea of the story exists in literature, and then on the stage, and then as a film. And each one is so different, and yet we're all borrowing from what Michael Morpurgo created.
Arsen Heinrich from Zagreb, Croatia. First of all, congratulations on the movie, which is quite different from the dominant movies we get from Hollywood today. And I have a question. You started in period when filmmaking was still very important in Hollywood. And what is the comment on Hollywood today? Today Hollywood looks like Wall Street of world's culture or something like that.
Well, it might look that way if you read the papers. It's not that way when you're in Hollywood making movies. The creative process, the people who are giving everything that they have to express a story, to tell a story to you, the creative process is just as stimulating and just as, I guess, sharing. It's a very collaborative process. And I know it might seem that way because so much ink is spilled and media is obsessed with business and numbers and studios and that sort of thing. The filmmakers don't feel that way. We just go off and we tell our stories, and it's the same torture that we endure is the same torture that our forefathers endured making movies in the golden era of Hollywood. You know, so from my perspective, it's no different than I'm sure it was for the men and women who I admire so much who made the earliest movies.
Mr. Spielberg, scarcely is the British landscape looked so good on film. I wonder what was your initial reaction to both the Devon and the Castle Doom locations?
Oh, Castle Coombe it looks like Hollywood built it. You know, it doesn't look real, but it's beautiful. It's very authentic and very old. The Devon location has some of the most natural wonders in all of England. With the tours that are so beautiful, those the tours that are built up in a very most unusual way. I've only seen something like this one other time, and that was in New Zealand, where there are also tours in large areas, kind of high desert. But there's nothing like the landscapes of Devon. We couldn't believe it. And you know, the original script didn't have the budget that allowed us to go to Devon. And we stretched the budget a bit to afford to go there, and it was worth every penny.
You know, it was pretty extraordinary because everyone had told us that when you get down into Devon and Cornwall, you run the risk that it could be raining quite a bit. And that's partly why it's so beautiful. But we had these extraordinary days with, we had wonderful sunny skies, but we also had the fog come in and a lot of texture to the landscape. And the amazing thing is that farmhouse, when we left, literally a week later, it rained every day so hard that entire area flooded. So we were blessed in some way. I think somebody was looking out for us.
The question I'm asked quite often is how much people love the digital skies that we obviously painted.
It's the end of the movie, yeah.
All through the movie, and there's not a single sky that we put in through special effects. The skies you see in the movie are the skies that we experience. The sunsets you have in the movie are the sunsets that we experienced,
I don't think I've been on a movie where you were shooting and you look around and suddenly the whole crew stops working and they're just staring out at the landscape, because that sunset at the end of the movie, I have to give huge credit to Steven, because it isn't exactly the way the ending was written until that sunset appeared, and Steven instantly knew how he was going to frame
But
it.
it took 3 days to shoot it because I had this idea based on the spectacular sunset, how to do it with the fence posts and everything. And then all of a sudden I only got I only got about 5 shots because the sun goes down awfully fast in Devon. And so we had to come back again and again to get matching skies to make that whole sequence work.
Okay, a question lady at the back.
I wanted to ask about how many horses did it take and how many horse trainers to make it all work out?
One main horse trainer, Bobby Lovegren, and he had a staff of beautiful horse whisperers that worked with him through Spain and Australia and the UK and America and Ireland. There were 8 horses, but really principally only 2 horses that I worked with all the time, Abraham and Finder, and they played the main joeys. Other horses were specialty horses that knew how to run without a rider. Horses that knew how to back out. There were certain horses that were trained just to do one performance moment, but I pretty much always see Joey as essentially one horse. Of course, I hope you see Joey as one horse. That's the idea of movies. But I really see Joey as 2 horses. 2 horses I work with the most. The ones that give me the most improvisation in the movie.
It takes about 45 minutes in makeup, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. A little bit longer than the actors.
Well, the equine department was always arriving first and leaving last. And all those people had to get there at 4, 3 or 4 in the morning to get the horses ready.
Throughout your wonderful career, what do you think, could you tell us what your turning point was, and also the reason why you could continue what you love as a career for so long? And also, we in Japan are going through a very difficult time at the moment, and the earthquake and the nuclear crisis. It's almost as though people all over the world are at the forefront of the war with a tremendous sense of fear. What do you think the most important thing is in this trying time?
The most important thing in any trying time is never give up hope and never give up, the recovery of your spirit and the recovery of your hope for the future. That's once you give up hope, you give up your soul. So I certainly always encourage anybody who undergoes any kind of a personal or communal disaster that's the first thing they must never give up. The turning point in my career was Jaws. And it was a turning point because I was a director for hire before Jaws, and after Jaws it was such a big hit, I could do any movie I wanted, and Hollywood just wrote me a check, And I wanted to do this crazy movie about flying saucers, and nobody wanted to make it before Jaws, and I tried to get people to make this crazy movie about flying saucers. They'd say, "Oh, this big mothership comes down at the end, you're gonna love it," and this guy goes off and climbs into the mothership, and people thought I was crazy. And they wouldn't give me the time of day. The second Jaws was a hit. Everybody said, "What about that mothership movie you had? What about that flying saucer movie? You still want to make that?" So Jaws really was a turning point.
Okay, a question there, then one very back. Sir? Yeah. Oh, so one, so, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah.
Can I just ask Steve something about the young actor who you chose to take this part, this very important part, and what made Jeremy Irvin stand out? Presumably you looked at lots of potential.
Hundreds. I looked at hundreds of potential Alberts. And what made Jeremy stand out was just that ineffable quality that certain stars have, or certain exceptional people have that just stand out and rise above the rest. And I looked at hundreds of very interesting actors and newcomers, mainly newcomers, and nobody had the heart or the spirit or the communication skills that Jeremy had, even in silence, even without speaking, even in his crude videotape test that we did through our casting director here in London, Gina J. Jeremy, every time I saw him on, he tested 5 times. He just got better and better and better. And I'm very accustomed to working with actors who have no experience. I mean, you can just look back at E.T. with my kids in E.T. and Drew Barrymore and Christian Bale from Empire of the Sun, who never made a movie before, very similar to the history and career that I think Jeremy could be in store for Jeremy. So I really trust the authenticity of real people, and my job is to get them to be themselves in front of the camera. Often what happens is you get a newcomer in front of the camera and they freeze up, or they imitate actors and other performances that they've admired and they stop becoming themselves. And so my job as the director is just to always return them to what I first saw in them, which was simply an uncensored human being. And I don't want Jeremy to be a character actor. I didn't want Jeremy to be somebody he wasn't. I simply wanted him to be the person that he is today, and he did a wonderful job playing himself.
Mr. Spielberg, your film is gloriously old-fashioned, and I mean that's a compliment. And I wondered, in the making of the movie, whether you were dipping into childhood memories of heroes like John Ford.
Yes, of course. John Ford, Howard Hawks, Raoul Walsh, David Lee, just Louis Milestone, Victor Fleming, Michael Curtiz, my heroes. Many more than that, too. It goes beyond just American directors. But what I was looking to do, and I think part of it was the inspiration of your country. This could only have been shot in England. This is a British film. This is the most British film I've ever made. I once thought Empire of the Sun was a British film, but I think I disqualified that after I heard the reaction last night at the Odeon in Leicester Square and realized I had made my first British film with Warhorse, through and through. And yet at the same time, the works of John Ford, How Great Was My Valley, The Quiet Man, very evocative. He painted beautiful landscapes, and he included the land as part of his storytelling. And how could you not include Devon and Dartmoor? How could you not include Luton Hoo or the Duke of Wellington estate, where he shot so much of the picture? The land sort of was a character, and in a sense, that's what a lot of the old directors did. They just featured the land they were standing on. It's kind of fun when you get to put a wide-angle lens on, not just shoot close-ups for an entire movie.
Gentleman, that's it. Yeah.
Mr. Spielberg, you call this a story of love, but it's also a story of war. Why do you keep going back to those?
Well, I don't often mix my metaphors, so this is what makes this unique, is it is a story of love and a story of war. But I don't see this really as a war story. This is not Saving Private Ryan, this isn't Band of Brothers, this isn't, a typical war film. If you really look at the movie, there's only about 12 to 15 minutes of combat in this film, from the cavalry charge to the fighting in the Somme. This is not really that kind of a film. I wanted families to see this picture together. There's hardly any blood in this movie at all. Unlike Saving Private Ryan, where I was trying to acquit the actual testimonies of the young men that fought in France on D-Day, and I was trying to make the movie as brutally authentic as I possibly could. I took a different approach to this story. So for me, it's a combination of both.
And in terms of the war, it does have things to say about sort of courage in combat and tenacity in combat, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. But courage in combat is really, Albert shows tremendous courage in pressing forward on this Somme when he crosses no man's land, And it's almost blind fear that makes him race forward. And that so often happens, but he also has a reason to be racing forward. He has a goal in his heart of a horse he's hoping to find amongst the millions of horses in France. He actually is audacious enough to think he may find the one, and in fact it seems that the one finds him instead.